body or heart. So if it doesn't, and some people will argue, you know, like, and you can actually do this if you, like, you draft out your scenes on index cards. You can actually put like a little minus, like maybe the hero starts the scene and he's downtrodden, but by the end, you know, like he's found the ship and he's going on to, you know, to train as a Jedi. You know, so looking at the point of view, because we love our characters and our knee-jerk reaction is to protect them as though they are our babies. And so we don't want to do bad things to them. And a lot of times in the first draft, I will totally shy away from doing horrid things to my characters. So a lot of times they do end up changing the point of view. And the risk has to be there, and it has to be decent. You know, like if a mugger holds you up and you have $4 in your pocket, that's not that big of a deal. But if that person holds you up and you have your life savings in your pocket that, by the way, you've just taken out to put your, you know, aging grandfather in a nursing home and they need that money or they're going to take his house, wow, that's totally two different stories.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. My character watching the emotions of one person and reacting to it is very different than being the character who's having the emotions. And sometimes you're right, on a first draft, I just need to look at the emotions. I need the distance as I'm developing, and then I can switch it later.
I want to ask, because we're at 8 now, so I want to ask if there are questions and how we can help you guys, or if you just want to talk more about a particular subject. Yes?
So about what you were just saying about the point of view character should be the one with the most to gain and the most to lose. So I'm wondering how that applies either when you've chosen a point of view character, like one that you, this whole novel you have one point of view character, and sometimes that character is going to be observing a thing happening to a minor character that has an impact on the plot, but is not that character's personally most important thing going on at the moment. And or similarly, I guess a more extensive version of that is when you've chosen it as your point of view character, a Watson who is always the observer of the protagonist, and you want to use that character's position as an observer to your advantage, but you know, but the person who's realized the most mistake is Holmes and not Watson.
Sure. You guys wanna...
Yeah, actually, it's interesting because I mean, it may. Yes, it would appear if the person who's watching, you know, is watching his friend's mother's die, the one whose mother's dying has got the most at stake. But the process of watching a good friend lose your mother doesn't mean you don't have a lot at stake. And by the way, I love that you brought up Holmes, because Holmes is the great protagonist. You always say you have to go on a journey, you have to change. The reason we watch through Watson is because Watson changes. Holmes doesn't change. He's an anti-hero through and through, and so watching through Watson lets us see how what is at stake for somebody else may not change them the way it changes him. So if you are, because you mentioned having a first person, so that's always going to be.
I was going to say, I don't really have a horse in this race, because from that first person point of view,
you don't have a choice.
I
Harry
have
Potter
to find
is
a way to do it.
So what are some techniques for when you really, you know, other than the so why are you looking so blue? Well, yesterday my mother died. What are some techniques for getting the emotional information out, or the event information out, when my novel is also the third person sort of singular one viewpoint?
Well, I mean, I write from third person multiple viewpoints, but one of my favorite techniques for showing how much characters care about each other is to have them analyze each other's emotional states. So I will, and this may be pertinent to you, and that's why I bring it up, because one of the ways that I show that my character Phaedra cares about my character Hunter, right, is that she observes what is going on with him, and he happens to be a very repressed person who doesn't exhibit a lot of emotion, and if I were writing the scene from his point of view, it would be a lot more boring.
Because he shut down.
Because he shuts down. But she can observe him shutting down, and she can worry about him. And she can worry about what's going on in his head, and is he going to be all right, and is there anything I can do about it? And that way you're really characterizing two people at once in a very pleasant and interesting way, because you get both her concern and how much she cares for him, and you get what's happening in his head much better than he gets what's happening in his head.
You know, the character of Sheldon on The Big Bang Theory is somebody who does things by rote, 9 times out of 10, not by emotion. You're sad, here's a warm beverage, it's on the list of things to do. And those few occasions when he does it out of actual emotion, you can hear the audience react.
Yeah.
It's so great. So that's what you can do. They may not be the one to have the most at stake, but when this character has now done something that's a little out of their comfort zone for this character who's going through something, or that empathy, that change, that, you know, this character's grown, oh my God, you know, that's another way to keep emotion there for your reader through that process. So if you have a shutdown character using the other person as, or when they suddenly do display it.
If you have a character going through some sort of emotional journey that you've never personally been involved in, what are some ways that you've found to find the true emotion for that?
I'm super glad you asked
journey.
that. That was on my list of questions to get to. I'm very glad you asked that.
If you're ready to jump in,
Yeah, you're also, I can.
Go ahead.
Do
Jump.
it.
Take the leap.
I honestly, I try really hard to. I've experienced a lot of things in my life, and I've experienced a lot of different stuff. I tend not to. I don't really write about it very often, and honestly, I really can't. Besides, there's a lot of action in a lot of my novels, and there's a lot of gunfire and stuff, and so I went to a gun range and I fired some guns, and I took in not just the mechanism of doing it, how it felt, how it sounded, how it smelled, how it felt, and wrote everything, like took notes, took mental notes, and wrote everything down, because experience is the most important key. It's really, like, I've seen things where you can tell when a writer has done something and when a writer is making crap up. And there's even with the best of writers, there's a difference. And nothing beats writing about your experiences. That's one of the reasons why they always say, write what you know. And that was one of the first things I ever heard about writing, was write what you know. And that's what I try to do. And, you know, yeah, I've never taken a human life, but I've experienced death. I've killed other things. I've like everything, like, and you just you draw on all of that, and you use it to develop what your idea of what it should be.
So you like take
You
puzzle
meld
pieces
it all
from your
together.
life and kind of
You
build
just piece it
another
all
picture.
together.
If you ever actually spend the time, and I've done it, it's actually quite fun to write down all the things you've done, experienced, people
This is
you've
huge.
people you've been. Keep a notebook and just keep doing it, you know, and adding things. I write women's fiction as well, and I had a scene between two characters where one's describing, I was in her head and she's talking about her parents' divorce. My parents have been married 52 years, and I'm realizing the scene read flat, and so I moved out of her point of view to the friend listening to it. And her heart breaking for a friend who didn't have what I've had, and that made, then I could write it. Because I've certainly listened to and watched friends get divorced. But I do have, I mean, I agree that it's hard sometimes where, have you read the book Water for Elephants? I found myself, much as I liked the book, I knew she'd never been a 19-year-old boy, a 90-year-old man. And so there was a part of me that had, Shirley MacLaine aside, was sort of divorced from the book and kept wondering, you know, if she was actually writing from a point of view that she had lived and experienced, how much better. And it's not that the writing isn't good, it is. Michael Cunningham's The Hours is very good, but if he were writing something he'd actually, how much better would it, your best writing. It's not that it's impossible, but your best writing. The other thing to do is, if you think in terms of a movie, you've watched characters who you don't experience, you can do that in your book. You can be the camera as opposed to the head, you know, that's.
Yeah, I just want to jump in and say that when the adage "write what you know" gets in your way, which certainly if you write, you know, fantasy or something, it will. But if write what you know gets in your way from an emotional standpoint or something, you know, like divorce, knowing more is an option. You can research things, you know. I wouldn't say get a divorce, but for example, right? So
Don't recommend it for sexual assault.
no. But right. So I wrote a character who is pregnant and has a baby, right? I have obviously never been pregnant or had a baby. My character is delivering vaginally. My wife had 2 C-sections, right? Where I cannot possibly know what this is like. But you know what there's a lot of online and in books is women's stories, when they write down the story of what their birth was like. You know, and you can read spiritual midwifery, or you can read any number of other birth narratives, and you can pay attention, you know, and so you can research things.
But find a beta reader who has been through it.
Absolutely.
Because
Yes.
I would, there's this other thing is he can read all he wants and still miss, and to you it would read well, and to another man it would read well. See, I have an advantage. I write in the head, in romance, I write in the head of a man, and I'll be damned, I can promise you, I'm writing the way I want a man to think.
Yeah. But probably.
This is my fantasy, this is my reader fantasy.
These are all awesome ideas, and I will add, I had a little bit of a unique experience because when I wrote the YA, it was about this character who was really mad at her father, and her father is basically this drunken layabout and has left all of the work to her, and she would rather clearly be off having like a childhood, and she kind of has to hold the family together and be the stalwart one, and he's essentially the child who needs taken care of, and she is like super angry at him, and I had a very hard time writing that, and it kept coming out flat and kept coming out flat, and it was because my own father was he was just an absentee father, and it was so painful for me to dredge up. I just couldn't go there and couldn't go there and couldn't go there. And eventually I changed it to first person present tense. And like as soon as I had that connection with the character, I was able to go there. And it was no less painful. In fact, like there are times when I'm writing it where I'm just like, oh my God, this is like my life, you know, and it's like
Writing can be painful.
It is.
Writing
It
there are times you have to stop. Like you're just like, I need to walk away for a little bit. I'm wrecking myself emotionally. And I don't know whether it's necessarily that you're doing a good job of it when you do that, but you know,
you have to
the
protect
emotion
yourself.
should definitely be, you know, should be in the story if you're doing that much, you know, damage to yourself.
Yeah.
And when
Being able to self-assess is really important.
Yes.
You know, to say like, is it my technique? Is it and what I do is I keep this book that I brought, and it's full of all of like my tips, and each tip has a page. So if I get really stuck and I have no idea what the hell is going on, I have all these tips, you know, like think smaller motivations. The hero wants to save the world, sure, but why? You know, plot, like, you know, is the last resort of a good writer. You know, like significance
Stephen King will tell
starts
you that.
within the focal character, you know. That is how you move the emotional compass. It's like, are the scenes immediate and engaging? Engage the reader by any means necessary, emotionally, sensually. So I can actually go through my handy book of stupid shit I've done and make sure I'm like, you know, I'm not doing that. And it's like, it's invaluable for the times when you can't have a beta reader or that you need an more immediate solution.
And when your family then asks you, what can I do? Because my husband's not a beta reader for me. You can then tell them, look, you know, I'm writing something that's going to make me feel vulnerable, and this is what I need from you. So there are other things you can ask, because you'll have friends who say, you know, can I read it? And you're like, no, but I could really use just a hug or an understanding, or remember the time I told you about? Well, I'm kind of going through that on the page, and the closer you can be to your emotions consistently, and we all know that that's, as you said, it's not going to happen every day. Or if it happens every day for a while, you're going to need a time off. That's a place to get love and support.
So do we have another quick question we can answer? We have about...
Did your train ever come back?
We have about 3 minutes, so if there's no
kind of,
question...
my
we'll...
train got irrelevant. My train was irrelevant in the first place. It was just something YA related when we were talking about YA and how it kind of varies on genre within YA because as someone who really exclusively reads fantasy YA, it's very different from a lot of what I hear other YA readers talk about. For example, I really don't read a lot of books that are in the first person at all. I read pretty much only third person and things like that. It was just
Well, but that's a good point. You know, as there are readers who need different things at different times too,
Yeah.
and your books will reach the people. Knock on wood.
That's also epic fantasy is very, first person is very much like this. And I don't know if you've ever watched an epic fantasy on a big screen going like this, but it doesn't work out very well because you can't get those big sweeping. Like for instance, if Lord of the Rings was told in first person, like you'd never find out anything because like Frodo is just like, oh shit.
And let's remember, books for most people are an escape of one sort or another, whether it's to bring them closer to emotions that they can't get to themselves, or to take them away. It can be that too. I mean, your life may feel like this, and so you need a book that's just like this. And that's part of the magic. It's part of the magic of why we write. It's part of the magic of why we read, or go to the movies, or do any of this and create these characters and these worlds and these journeys and these emotions, because we need different things at different times, and it's a good thing.
Does anyone? I'll just ask Yes, we do have the one quick question.
Have you ever been surprised emotionally as you've been writing?
Yes.
I'm writing for this, whoa!
Yes.
I seem to be writing for that, or I'm writing that suddenly.
And I've had the character do that. I'm like, you did what?
A lot of times I at the end, I know where I want to start, I know where I want to finish. But when I start a book, I have no idea where I'm, sometimes I still have no idea where I'm going. And the voice in my head just brings me there.
Is the plane being off course? Isn't a plane off course like a huge percentage of the time? As long as it lands on the airport, it
gets there. That's all that matters. And that's the fun of it. That's the fun of the writing is just not knowing exactly where you're going all the time, and you just like.
And this is why it's important to write every day.
Yes.
Because and I don't mean like like crazy. Like you gotta like put down the word count, but you have to have your story in your mind every day, even if you're just reviewing notes or doing research, because it keeps it fresh, and you'll be able to suddenly make these connections, like these plot connections, and if you're constantly mulling it over and it's in your subconscious, because I really feel that a lot of writers, I know myself, I write toward meaning and not from it.
Yeah.
You want to say something super quick?
I mean,
We're at 8:15, so we have something super quick.
If when I get to a place where I'm stuck, where I feel like I can't go forward, and for some reason I just like, whatever I try to type down doesn't make sense, it is always because I've already made a mistake earlier on. Every time. There's always, 3 chapters ago I made a mistake, and if I fix that, I will know where to go.
I'll be there.
So.
Right, well I want to thank everybody for coming, thank my panelists. If you like this panel, please give them